Hello, welcome to Cal Poly's Fertigation series. It's brought to you by the Irrigation Training and Research Center here at Cal Poly. My name is Charles Burt. I'm a professor emeritus here at Cal Poly. I taught irrigation for lots of years, and I have a degree in soil science, and also, of course, I work in irrigation. And this particular topic of fertigation is very interesting to me. I think it's really we're going to make tremendous advances in the next few decades trying to improve the yield per unit of water that's actually consumed, and also, of course, to protect the environment. If you notice on this slide, the whole effort here is being promoted by and actually funded by the Fertilizer Research and Education Program, or FREP, of the California Department of Food and Agriculture. This first video is really just an introduction to you to let you know a little bit more about what the whole series is about and where you can get resources. If you notice, this says free online resources, and it says right here where it's blue here, itrc.org/books. Actually, our website is www.itrc.org. We have a lot more than books. We have quite a few technical articles there. All things dealing with irrigation efficiency and drip irrigation systems and so on. But what this shows is that you can download Cal Poly's second edition of the Fertigation book for free. Specifically, we have two books. One's in English and one is in Spanish. And you can download either one. All you have to do is go to the website. Here you have another link to a whole series of videos. Really what these are is they were laboratory exercises that we set up, and we recorded them to show you some specific things that are difficult to get across in a lecture format. So we hope you enjoy these. Later on, I'm going to show you the list of all of the videos. Right now, when this is being done, we don't have them all laid out like this, but they'll all be found in about the same location. Basically, they play as YouTubes. Now, here's the kicker on this. Not all the topics are going to be interesting or pertinent to everyone. And it's because there's such a huge range of topics in a book like Fertigation or in a topic. You know, they range from chemistry. In other words, if you want to know something about fertilizers and where they go and how they're used, there's just no getting around it. It helps to have a little chemistry background. You don't have to have a degree in it, but you have to understand something about it. So, you know, if you're not too familiar with that, you'll have to go a little slowly and pay a little attention to it. Maybe write things down. At least you have the book there to reference. And then it goes on to hardware options for fertilizer injections and so on. Now, the plan is to eventually have some type of a certification program with the topic of fertigation. And, you know, if you want to get certified, you would have to have some knowledge of all the topics. But as it is, once you see the list, you may want to pick and choose between different topics. On the next slide, you'll see the table of contents, and that'll give you an indication of the breadth of the topics. There are really quite a few. The next 4 slides will show you what we have in the book on the table of contents. So there's quite a bit of information here, and when you download it, hopefully it will help you out. But there's an introduction regarding stewardship, the energy it takes to manufacture fertilizers. You might be surprising, actually. We had a study some time ago with peppers, and we found out that the biggest single energy component in, if you take a look at the energy required to manufacture the hose and pump the water and drive the tractors and, you know, everything you do with farming, the biggest single energy component with peppers was the fertilizer. Anyway, then there's a safety. Safety deals with everything ranging from how to protect people. You know, we have some chemicals, like some acids that are dangerous. You have to be careful of them. To how to protect from drinking water supplies or groundwater supplies from getting contaminated, to how you prevent equipment from blowing up. So that's a fairly important chapter for people who are going to be setting up hardware and actually doing operations. Then with chemical injectors, we have a separate video. It's kind of like a lab video that deals with that. And this discusses why you might want to select one or the other and the attributes. Proportional fertigation is sort of a special topic. It isn't really that common yet, although some farmers use it extensively. Proportional fertigation deals with automatically changing the injection rate of chemicals to match the flow rate of the irrigation system. This is also something that's very applicable for landscape irrigation systems and even home systems. I have a proportional fertigator at my house. Then there are some special chemicals. These aren't really fertilizers, but this is SO2, that's sulfur dioxide, and gypsum. And then there's some solids which are injected, and they require special discussion. Then it turns out on chapter 6 here, we deal with irrigation principles, leaching, and fertilizer uniformity. Basically, it's like this. Fertigation deals with the application of fertilizers through irrigation water. You want to do a good job with your fertilizer? Well, you have to do a good job with your irrigation, because that's how the fertilizer is getting out there. So this discusses things like that, the general concepts of leaching and uniformity. Now we're on to the second page. And starting with chapter 7 here, if you take a look at different irrigation methods, really they have to be fertigated differently. You know, the way you fertigate into a drip system or microsystem which stays in place is completely different than how you would have to inject fertilizers through a center pivot where it's moving every minute. You know, if you miss a few minutes with a center pivot, you miss a whole wedge. And then there's surface irrigation. You know, you really have to read it carefully. A lot of people put some kind of fertilizer in with the furrows and border strips, but they don't typically do a very good job. That doesn't mean you can't do a good job, but you have to learn the little tricks. On 8, then we start getting more into the fertilizers, and since nitrogen is the biggest single fertilizer that we use, and there's so many kinds of nitrogen fertilizer, and the form that the nitrogen fertilizer in changes depending on you know, the bugs in the soil. Basically, that's kind of a crude way, but there are a lot of transformations, microbial transformations, where you go from one form to another. And so you know, you put one kind of nitrogen fertilizer in there and it may be immediately available, and another type may not. So this gives you an idea of how things are transformed, how things move around. Chapter 9 deals with nitrogen uptake. You know, when do you need it, how much, how does it move, stuff like that. And then all the others are lumped into chapter 10, and that's the other macronutrients like potassium and phosphorus. And then the secondary nutrients like calcium. And you know, a lot of people really see calcium as a major factor with good nutrition. And then you have the micronutrients and chelates and so on like that. Finally, then you get into the fertilizers themselves as opposed to the nutrients. And so it's good to know about you know, if you want nitrogen, for example, should you use urea? Should you use CAN 17? And what does that mean anyway? And so this chapter talks about that. What does it really mean when you talk about a specific fertilizer, and why might you use one versus another at a particular time of the year? That's for the same nutrient. You can see here that there's a little bit about most of the common fertilizers. CAN 17, you know, calcium ammonium nitrate. What's urea? Then urea sulfuric, and so on. And so there's a little bit in here that discusses, you know, how much nitrogen, for example, is in a particular fertilizer, and why might you use that fertilizer versus another fertilizer. Then we have a couple of short chapters here on biostimulants. There's a lot of interest in that by various people, and then organic fertilizers, of course. And even something here on air and oxygen injection. Now, this is a second edition, and since this has been written, there's been additional work done on nanobubbles, and you might want to check that out. We don't have that covered in this book right now. If you move on then, let's see, we've dealt with injection methods, irrigation techniques, different kinds of fertilizers, different nutrients, and now we get to the plant and soil testing to find out how much you might need. You know, what do you test? Do you test the sap? Do you test the soil, what in the world do you test the soil water? They're all different. And then we have chapter 16 is really a description of a few specific crops and how they use fertilizer, not fertilizer, but nutrients throughout the season. What the rates are, how much they need, and so on. And they're examples. And they're meant as guidance, and you can find more information in other sources. University of California has some excellent information on these. In the book, we have some sample fertigation calculations. We really don't go through those in the videos, but you can get them there. And then there are two other big topics. In California, we have a tremendous percentage of drip and micro irrigation, and of course, in many systems, there are problems with maintenance. Specifically either calcium precipitation or some combination of calcium and something else, or bacteria growth in the hoses. And so that usually requires some kind of amendment to the irrigation water, which you chemicate. You have to apply. So there's a discussion about, chlorine and SO2 and different things, acid, things like that you would use for specific problems. And then finally, again, this is for the western U.S. There are things dealing with infiltration problems. We have a lot of pure water in the Pacific Northwest and on the west side of not the west side, the east side of the San Joaquin Valley in California. And other areas have high sodium. And so this is a chapter that deals with infiltration problems that are caused by chemistry problems. And it turns out if the chemistry in the water negatively impacts the infiltration, normally there's something you can do to alter that water chemistry to make it right again. So that's what chapter 19 deals with. This is a list of the 25 modules that are in this fertigation series by the Irrigation Training and Research Center and funded by FRIP. And you can see that it kind of follows the book. It's not in the same order, but there are a lot of lecture type things. Nutrient needs, nutrient tests, fertilizer labels. Some are short, some are longer. And we have the lab videos interspersed here. And we end with something about resources, interviews with impacted communities. Now what that deals with is the nitrate problems in the groundwater. And then there are interviews with agronomists, consultants, and farmers on how they actually implement things or give recommendations. Now in this series, we do have references to specific companies that supply things and photos of, proprietary, well, it isn't quite proprietary, but, equipment from specific manufacturers. And these are not meant as endorsements. But I always thought that when you have a lecture or you read a book, you ought to know at least where you might find some of this stuff. Otherwise, it's just sort of theoretical. So these are to give you an idea of what's available. And there are other manufacturers, of course. So hopefully this will help you. The second video is kind of unusual compared to the other videos. But I decided to put it right up front, because otherwise, we'd be talking about ammonia and ammonium, and you wouldn't necessarily know what we're even talking about. And things like the cation exchange capacity, that shows up in different places. And depending on your background, this may seem to be too basic, or it might seem too complicated. But, if you can struggle through it or take what you can out of it, it should help you understand a little bit more about fertilizers and fertilizer transformations. That means, especially nitrogen, how it goes between ammonium and nitrate and so on, and then also nitrogen leaching. So thank you for joining us, and as I said at the beginning, we hope this series will be helpful and enjoyable for you. This is just a reminder of who we are and where the funding came from, and there's our web address right there where we have quite a bit of information. I'd like to also let you know that we have quite a few short courses we put on every year. Normally we have one on fertigation every year, but we also have them on drip system design, irrigation system evaluation, pumps, irrigation scheduling, and for irrigation districts we have classes on SCADA, that's supervisory control, data acquisition, or telemetry some people call it, and flow measurement, and topics like that. They're usually 1 to 3 days long each. So you can find that information on our website. So thank you, and I'll see you for the next videos.